The deflationary effect of technology is dramatic. In the future, purchasing a car that now costs 60,000 US dollars, maybe that car, when it's done fully automatically, could cost $6,000. Maybe the food and groceries that you go to buy now, that cost you a few $100s per shopping trip, manufactured at scale, fully automatically and locally, could be the fraction of the cost.
What if AI and robotics could unlock a future where everyone can afford everything, from food and energy to healthcare and education? In this episode of Mind Blowers, we sit down with Dalibor Petrovic, a techno-optimist, thought leader, and former global CIO program leader at Deloitte, to explore whether humanity is heading toward abundance or collapse. Dalibor introduces a powerful framework of 6 essential parameters that must align to reach a truly abundant future, where technology benefits everyone, not just the elite. Some of these pillars are advancing rapidly. Automation, energy, and intelligence are moving fast. But others, like the economic systems needed for a post-labor world, are dangerously lagging behind. And if we don't fix that gap, the consequences could be disastrous. Rising inequality, social unrest, and a future where abundance exists. But only for a few. This conversation is urgent, bold, and packed with insight. Stay with us. This one will blow your mind. Hi, and welcome to the Mind Blowers podcast. Today we have Dalibor Petrovic. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Got close enough.
Close enough. Anyway, it's great to meet you, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolute pleasure.
So today we're going to talk about the future and the future of abundance. But before we jump into that, maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell the listeners, why you're in a good position to be talking about this.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation. It's a pleasure to be with you. So my name is Dalibor, as you suggested. I've spent the last 3 decades in the field of technology, which has been very sort of inspiring, informative, and led me to a particular worldview that I would like to share with the audience. Over these 3 decades, the last 2 decades I spent with one of the largest global professional services firms, where I led a significant portfolio focused on technology and technology leaders. So I have been first-hand seat, observing the transformation and evolution of technology and how it has been shaping and changing our society in real time over the last 3 decades. And through that experience, I became a proponent of a particular, as a worldview, I call it techno-optimist view, which proposes that we are at a frontier of a completely new model for humanity, a model that could be dramatically better than the societal model we've lived through in the past. So I believe that we are right now at this particular moment living through the most consequential period of human history, that we are facing significant challenges, but at the end of those challenges is a gold pot, and at the end of that rainbow that I think is superbly compelling and exciting. So what I would like to do is I would like to compel people to think about this. I would like to contribute to the conversation because I believe that this conversation will prove to be existential for humanity overall, that we are at a junction and that we have the choice to make collectively of what is the future that we are going to be shaping for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren. So to me, that's really why I am interested in this particular topic. And I'm also using this particular mindset of abundance as opposed to scarcity to rationalize and explain other things that are occurring in the world right now, from global geopolitics to the global economy, and of course the evolution of the societies in which we both live, right? So that's really where my passion and interest comes, and what my desire here is to really to inform, to provoke, to contribute to these conversations that I think we all must be having these days.
Yeah, and I know that you left a successful career at Deloitte as well to pursue this. Can you talk? I mean, were you inspired kind of by your career and your experiences in Deloitte to kind of see this way of the world?
Absolutely. I've decided to take early retirement from the firm so that I can spend all of my time mobilizing and organizing myself and my affairs to be ready for what's coming. So I would be an example of somebody who's taken pretty significant action in response to what I believe is coming our way. And now that I am, outside of the traditional corporate, actually it's not a corporate, it's a firm world, I feel in better position to navigate the complexities that are now going to be they're facing me and they're facing all of us. So significant part of the reason why I decided to move on was to actually stay ahead. To stay ahead, I believe that we will discuss this more through the conversation. I think that we are entering pretty uncharted territories, where individuals are going to have to be more involved and more intentional about how they themselves position them and their families to succeed in this new world that is upon us.
Yeah, and it's actually
so that was the rationale, right?
Yes, and it's quite interesting because it seems we have done pretty much the same thing. I was, without knowing each other, I was in corporate as well, and pretty much when I turned 50, I decided that I wanted to step out of corporate and kind of embrace this whole AI evolution without a clear plan, to be honest, about exactly what that would look like.
Yeah. That is actually a very fair and correct statement, without knowing exactly what it's going to be look like. What I did know is that whatever is going to be looking like, I need to be in front of it as opposed to be behind it. I need to be in control of my destiny as opposed to be in a position to be reacting to what destiny brings me, if you know what I mean. So that was a major factor of me deciding to go at it on my own. Now I'm a founder and the CEO of an organization called the Summit Leadership Alliance, which exists essentially to help organizations activate their technology strategies and deliver real results, right? So that's really what I'm focused on. I think, by the way, that element is going to have it's going to be essential to the ultimate transition and success for individuals and organizations themselves, but also, when you add it all up, societies. And that it will be superbly important for every organization to figure out how do they actually understand and then realize the potential that technology has for them, right? So where I'm going with my plan is to actually double down on that, solving for that particular problem, by making sure that every organization has really a world-class technology leaders who can, with confidence, champion and deliver that technology mandate. So that really is, that's kind of the fuller picture, if you wish.
That's cool. So let's try and unpack this abundance thing for people, because
the abundance, yes,
because every time I bring it up, people are like, you need to stop. I mean, everything is getting more expensive, right? Milk is getting more expensive. Going to the doctor is getting more expensive. So I don't think people can understand us at all when we talk about,
Yeah.
that abundance is coming, more or less meaning, I guess,
Yeah.
that everything is becoming dirt cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. So well, maybe what we should do is start at the very top and maybe define the term before we go deeper into it. Um, so let's start actually with the world that we all know, the world that we have been operating in forever. This is the world of scarcity, right? We all live and operate in the world of scarcity, and that's the world. That's the mindset essentially that suggests that our world has limited resources and that there is not enough for everyone, right? Which, by the way, is true. Like, that is not incorrect. It's true. We currently today we actually still live in the world with limited resources where there is not enough for everyone. And that has been the case throughout history. As a matter of fact, that's been the case throughout the existence of life on Earth. Every single living creature is, fighting for survival in this world of scarcity. So this world of scarcity, if you think about it, it really dictates our survival strategies. And there are two basic survival strategies that everybody will recognize. We can either collaborate, right, towards success, or we can be in conflict as a strategy to succeed, right? And now, of course, because we live in a complex society, there have been flavors of these strategies that have emerged. So, collaboration can manifest itself, especially in the corporate world, as co-opetition or alliances being formed. And on this other end, conflict end, competition actually would be a version of a conflict, a more civilized version of a conflict, but it certainly is leaning on that strategy of conflict. So effectively, we have two strategies to win in this world of scarcity. It's collaboration or conflict. Well, the issue with conflict strategies is that they often deliver binary results, right? When you're in conflict, oftentimes at the end of that conflict, you have winners and you have losers. So that's a challenge, right? Now, these survival strategies also are unfolding at multiple levels simultaneously. So you as an individual, as a person, you need to figure out what are you going to be your survival strategies and to what degree are you going to be deploying cooperation with others and conflict with others in order to navigate and find your place in the world. Firms, of course, compete in and deploying strategies of competition, collaboration, but also conflict to succeed. Societies do so too, and so do nations and on the international geopolitical scene. So now, what is the net result of that? The net result is certainly a steady overall progress. And it's undoubtable. As a matter of fact, I am a big proponent of Steven Pinker and his work that's actually captured in this book, Enlightenment Now, which demonstrates with evidence that, we have indeed created a world that, has been progressing on literally every single measure of human flourishing as defined by United Nations. However, this progress has come at tremendously high costs and with frequent setbacks because of this conflict that is a valid strategy for survival, right? So if you just think about, the last 120 years, how much conflict, how much tragedy, how much setbacks we have experienced as humanity with, World War I, World War II, the wars that have been occurring in Asia. Hundreds of millions of people have died in this process, right? And this is just the way we have been conditioned to live, right? This is the environment in which we have been born and raised, and this is an environment we live in today. It's the environment of scarcity. However, what if the basic premise that our world has limited resources and that there is not enough for everyone, what if that basic premise no longer holds true? what if we actually live in a world that has plentiful resources available to all in a sustainable manner? What I think is happening is that technology evolution, technology deployment, and technology promise is already taking us on this path where its deployment across industries and sectors and geographies is going to result in a steady but inevitable decline in costs of all goods and services that technology is going to allow us to produce sustainably at a mass scale, and ultimately bringing us to a point where all goods and all services will be affordable and available to everyone, meeting all of their needs for sustenance, for example, right? All of those needs. And while this concept is not necessarily new, philosophers have spoken about, the utopian world. Economists have been playing with this concept. I think that we are now within visible reach of that state. Not only are we within visible reach of that state, I think it's actually inevitable. It's inevitable that we are going to get there. It is inevitable because of the simple market forces that will drive deployment of technology to its logical full potential. And that logical full potential will effectively mean that everything is fully automated and fully autonomous, and therefore productions of costs of goods and services is delivered at a fraction of the cost that we currently have, effectively allowing us to be able to afford access to all goods and services. But there is a problem here. And the problem is that I'm going to state something quite obvious, but as technology now is rolled out to allow us to produce these goods and services at this large scale in a sustainable way at a lower price point, that lower price point component comes at the cost of human labor and human wages. So technology, yeah.
So maybe just to exemplify this, I think what people tend to forget is if you go back 30 or 50 years, right, families would spend a much larger portion of their income on just food and clothes, which would leave less to having a nice house, for example, and they would maybe have one car instead of two cars. So while people feel that things are becoming more expensive, then it's actually more their kind of expectation that keeps moving
Correct.
for what you're supposed to be able to.
Correct. So you're absolutely right. So we have gone through a significant progress in that sense, that the quality of life we take for granted, especially in the West today, is actually dramatically better quality of life. We are surrounded by dramatically more powerful technology in every aspect of our living. So I think it's misguided to try to compare, what the life was like and how much it costed in 1950 versus 2025. Most of the things that we now leverage, use, and depend on were actually not even, they were not available, let alone accessible, right? So there is that element, of course, too. And technology as a deflationary force has played that role, again, throughout our history, right? The more technology is deployed, the less is the unit cost of its output, if you wish. And that has been a steady path. No question about that. Now, in our case now, today, and this has been rocket fueled by the AI revolution that we are living through over the especially last 4 or 5 years. This technology is inevitably going to be displacing human work. And that is going to be, sadly, the only practical way to get us to that point where full automation and full autonomy can produce all goods and all services at a fraction of today's costs. And to me, this is now the biggest risk and the largest opportunity that is facing humanity at this moment. And the important message that I would like to emphasize is that this is not optional. We are already on this path. We are well on this path. And the question is now, how much time do we have in order to ensure we collectively manage this transition out of work into something different while preserving the cohesion of our societies and peace of our societies? Because, I could see a scenario where this dramatic loss of work that is going to unfold in the next 5 years, 10 years, could result in significant upheavals and catastrophe. So we have to figure out a way to face this off, come up with models that are going to help us through this transition, so that at the end of this transition, we collectively end up in a good state, where the fact that we no longer need to work, or should I say that we no longer can work, because most of the humans are simply not going to be able to compare with the capability of AI systems and robots, that we could start viewing that as a liberation of human spirits, right? Liberation of human time, liberation of human spirit, and liberation of human creativity, so that we can be freed up to each individually pursue our ikigai, right? Our life's purpose. So this is the junction that we now are in. Are we going to be going left, or are we going to be going right? Are we going to be pursuing this? Are we going to be coming together to actually realize this promise of the age of abundance? Or are we heading into a dystopian cataclysm, which I think is actually quite possible if we don't play this right? Now, side benefit of the age of abundance, but a huge side benefit of the age of abundance, is that we are removing the necessity of conflict from our survival strategies. And therefore, if you have plentiful access to all resources that you need, there is obviously reduced need to be in conflict. There will still be conflict, but reduced need for a conflict as a survival strategy for individuals, for communities, for societies, for nations. Which means that collaboration should expand as a survival strategy. Collaboration should expand, and it will supersede conflict. Imagine all the good that will come from that, where our survival strategy is actually rotated towards collaboration with others as opposed to conflict. So the result of that will be, first, a peaceful, second, prosperous, and third, harmonious society. And I think that's the promise. This is the path that we must choose. So then the question really is, how are we going to do this, right? What do we need to do in order to generate this state of abundance? And I've spent a lot of time reading, thinking, discussing this particular question. And I have developed a framework that I think that your viewers will be able to see now on their screens. The 6 foundational elements that I believe are essential for a society to reach this state of abundance. There are 6 elements to that.
Maybe before you start that,
yeah.
So one counter argument I hear from many people, and that is whether they are doctors or builders, is that, well, in particular, the work that I do, they would say, I don't see it being automated because I'm a doctor. There are, would be psychological issues for a robot and a computer to take my job. If you are, let's say, a plumber, for example, he would say, yeah, it will take many years before a robot would have my dexterity, and so on and so on. So I think there's a lot of people who find arguments for why they do not believe that they will get automated away in a decade.
Yeah.
What do you say to those arguments?
Um, I believe that ultimately, there is not going to be a need for any human performed work. The question is just how long will it take? And I don't think that we are talking generations here. I think that we are talking years and decades here. If you think about what does human labor offer, there are four aspects that human labor offers. The first one is strength, right? Physical strength. The second is dexterity. The third is intelligence. And fourth is emotion, empathy, right? We have already automated strength. So strength has been automated since the Industrial Revolution number one. Before then, right? Since agricultural revolution, where we replaced, where we used cows and bulls to pull, to work on our fields. So strength has been replaced already. We are now in the middle of a replacement of intelligence with artificial version of intelligence. And right now, we are viewing it and using it as a supplementary helper of us. But you just need to fast forward the movie that we are on a few years, and you will derive to a point where every AI system is going to be multiply more intelligent than any individual human. Now, I'm not talking conscious, I'm talking intelligent. Intelligent as in a problem solver. Now, that's what I mean by intelligence. Then the third thing is dexterity, right? Dexterity, I think, is going to prove to be more complex than intelligence, solving for intelligence, because how it will be manifested is through automated and autonomous, both commercial robots and humanoid robots. And once the technology is at that state when a humanoid robot can, thread a needle, that solves for dexterity. And then it will be just a matter of how quickly can we scale up the manufacturing. So the last thing that remains for the humans to, if you wish, latch on in terms of job preservation is the emotion and wisdom. So I think that is going to be replaced last. So if I was thinking about, in bulks, what kind of jobs are going to be at risk first, second, and third, I would say that jobs that depend on intelligence and problem solving, which are most white-collar jobs, those jobs are at the most immediate risk of being, replaced by artificial workers. That's, I think, will be number one risk. Number two is going to be the jobs that actually require dexterity. So I think that in this scenario, tradespeople, who do the actual work with their hands, your builders, your plumbers, your, electricians, they actually are in a safer position at the moment than your regular accountants and consultants, if you know what I mean. And then the last replacement, I think, is going to be the replacement of those who are working in the fields that require deep empathy, contextual understanding, wisdom. But fast forward long enough, that too is no longer going to be needed. So to me, this is how I view this transition. And the question that I have, the unknown here, is how long is this process going to take? Now, some individuals, some people would consider that this is going to take a century. I think that is very, I think that's far too long. I believe that this is going to be occurring over the next decade and a half, to be honest. And part of the reason why I'm spending time to investigate this, think about this, and raise my voice to contribute to the conversation is because I fear that most people either do not know or do not understand the magnitude of transformation that's upon us and the tectonic impact it will have. So people need to be thinking about this, talking about this, and planning for it, right? Yeah, because it is actually, it's already here, it's happening. And if you just take a look at the news over the last couple of months and how many jobs have been lost just in high-tech companies in the world, like the world's largest high-tech companies. The announcements have been, if you're looking for this information, the announcements are available, and almost every week there are announcements of thousands and thousands of layoffs from world largest technology companies. What's happening? What do you think is happening elsewhere, right? So we are already in the middle of this. That's why this is urgent, and has to be discussed, and it has to be discussed candidly, and it has to be discussed truthfully and honestly, because the stakes are actually so high that this, I think, is going to be the most important decision that humans have ever faced, and that we are literally at the moment of choosing between dystopian and utopian futures. And I certainly want to be in the utopian version of it.
Agreed. So do you want to go through your 6 foundational elements of the road
Yes.
to abundance?
Yes. So I believe that there are 6 things that need to be in place for a society to achieve this state of abundance. And it all starts, or should I say, it all starts and ends with energy first. The society, first and foremost, has to ensure that it has access to plentiful and cheap energy. Energy is at the moment, I believe, the limiting factor of further acceleration of this progress. Let's call it progress. Energy. And if you think about it from that perspective, you can now start understanding some of the international dynamics that are occurring around solving for energy and energy independence. But energy, I think, is number one component, essential to be in place for a society to reach the state of abundance. Therefore, policymakers, whatever you are doing, if you are not ensuring that your society has access to plentiful energy in abundance, you are setting yourselves up for failure. I think that's really, really important to state. Now, eventually, the energy must be clean and renewable, but we're not there yet. And this train is coming at us too fast for us to be ignoring the fact that we have to produce energy today and tomorrow as we are embarking on a path to deliver energy ultimately that is clean, plentiful, cheap, solar at the end of the day, obviously. But to me, energy is number one. Number two is full resource independence. And what I mean by full resource independence, a society needs to ensure that it has free access, it has complete access and control over the full sort of economic life cycle, from all raw materials that are required to produce all goods and deliver services, all the way to the actual delivery of the goods to a consumer or services to a consumer. So resource independence, I think, is the second most important foundational element that sits on top of energy. Now, the third element that needs to be in place is advanced AI compute, and full connectivity. So the ability of everyone in that society to have access to, to this exchange, to this new economic exchange. So full connectivity, artificial intelligence that supersedes the intelligence of humans, fueled by ever increasing compute power. That's number 3, right? Now, what is then number 4? Number 4, in my opinion, is full automation and full autonomy. Full automation and full autonomy. That's the piece that is going to actually drive down the costs of goods and services to their least. Now, it is also important to think about why would that happen. As long as we preserve open market and market economy, competitive forces should be driving the costs of goods and services down as firms fully automate and achieve full autonomy. Now, to me, that is going to be a critical question. How long will that take? And that is the piece that has already started virtually through AI systems and now AI agents, but will be rocket fueled as autonomous driving becomes the norm, and as autonomous robots, and especially humanoid robots, become the norm, right? So number 4 is that full automation and full autonomy. Imagine what would be possible at this point. So we have plentiful energy. So energy is not an issue. We have closed fully the resource loop, and we have a circular economy potential. We have everyone connected and available to participate. We have full automation and autonomy. At this point, we are getting damn close to realizing the potential. 2 more factors are needed. 1 is the optimized supply chain to further reduce costs of these goods and services, driving them to their absolute theoretical minimum. And when I say optimized supply chain, what that means is having systems that will be automatically understanding the needs of a consumer and organizing the most efficient and effective delivery of such products to that consumer, right? So the way I would describe it is like for individuals, for people at home, for example, that your fridge is going to know your food preferences, right? How much you eat, what you like, what you don't like. The automatic systems are going to be ordering just enough of that food that you need prepared for your next day or 2. That automatic delivery systems will be delivering the ingredients to your home, and that your friendly robot at home is going to cook this for you, and it will be done automatically in the most cost efficient, energy efficient way, right? That is an example of fully optimized supply chain. So take that concept and apply it to everything else. Apply to everything else to the point where we might no longer need warehouses behind stores. We might no longer need stores at all. All of this could actually be happening automatically from the point of manufacturing to the actual consumer. So that's number 5, optimized supply chain. And now, the most important thing that brings this all together actually is number 6, which is the post-labor economic system. How do we actually govern this new reality in the way that benefits everyone, humans, right? That helps us navigate through this transition so that we ultimately land at that end state where we have achieved the state of abundance. So post-labor economics needs to be developed still. Needs to be developed, needs to be piloted, needs to be proven, and needs to be deployed, and it has to start yesterday. It has to start yesterday because we are all on this path already. So if you don't mind, I'll just maybe take a minute to discuss what this post-economic system needs to address. Yeah. So if you think about how do we secure our sustenance, how do we get income in order to afford our living, there are essentially three sources of income. The first source of income is your labor arbitrage. So we are exchanging our time for money, and that's the primary source of income for most people, right? That's work, that's labor. And that source of money is what we call wages. And some estimates would suggest that about 60% of economy input is coming through wages, people exchanging their time for money. The second source of income are your property rights. So, you own a property, you are renting a property, you are collecting a rent. That would be an example of, you getting income from a property right. So not your direct labor, your indirect labor. So property rights. And you can have, the most obvious one is rentals, but there are other sources of property rights, dividends from stocks and other things like that. It's a second source. And the estimates are that overall in the economy, about 20% of economic activity is generated through those property rights, number two. And number three are essentially government transfers, safety nets, the welfare, social security that is offered by governments at different levels. Those are the three. And the estimates are 60% from wages, 20% from property rights, and 20% from government. Now, we already established that we are facing a future which is unavoidable. We are on this path. The future where full automation and full autonomy is going to reduce the need for human labor drastically and quickly. So this 60% of money that comes through wages is coming down. And unless we figure out a way to light up the other two pillars, or imagine a fourth pillar to replace the first pillar, we are facing potential calamity and a catastrophe. So we have to figure out a post-labor economic system that is going to allow us to deal with this unavoidable decline in labor as a contributing factor for the economy. And to me, that really is going to be the key. Now, where are we at? Where are we at in terms of these six elements, foundational elements for the state of abundance? On the energy front, I think there are some really good news. We actually know how to solve this. We know how to solve this. We have technology to solve this already. Actually, I think that it is obvious, maybe self-evident, that ultimate energy is going to be solar energy. Solar energy is the source of all of energy, as a matter of fact, in the solar system, right? So ultimately, sun is the way to go. But we don't have the time. Actually, we do not have the time to get to there without an intermediate solution. And that intermediate solution is liquid natural gas and nuclear power and hydropower, right? So good news is we know the technology, we understand the technology, we know where the end state is, and now it's the matter of us collectively choosing to light up the intermediate energy sources to get us to that state where solar can actually replace all of energy in the long run. Now, knowing that, you can now think about how are your individual societies dealing with this energy. And what I can say is that observing what's been going on, especially in Western Europe in the last decade or so, it has been a systemic de-energization of Western Europe and de-industrialization of Western Europe, which I think is going to have significant strategic consequences, right? So this, to me, is very, very important for everybody to wake up and say, oh my God, we have to solve for the energy immediately, because the train is already, we're on this train already, the train of labor decline, right? I would mark us on a scale from 1 to 5. I would mark humanity at 4 regarding energy. And why I would say 4, because we know how to solve this, we have the technology to solve it, and it is only the choices of politicians, really, of whether or not they choose to solve it right now or not. So 4 out of 5. On the resource independence front,
Just a question here.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
do you see nuclear fusion and making that work to be a key here, or do you think we can actually do this without nuclear fusion?
So I believe that it is going to be a superbly important technology in the ultimate end state. But my fear is that we actually don't have the time to bet on it now. That the train is coming, the train of unemployment is coming, and we need to be mobilizing right now to afford access to abundant and cheap energy. We don't have the time to wait for nuclear fission, right? Eventually it will come, and eventually it will going to further help with the stage of abundance. But the next 5 to 10 years, I think, are going to be critical, and I don't think it's going to be at scale in the next 5 to 10 years. So to me, the answer has to be a combination of known nuclear, small, medium-sized nuclear reactors combined with access to the cleanest possible form of carbon energy, which is liquid natural gas. So to me, that is the immediate solution. And for many people, this will not sound right because of the environmental concerns and so on and so forth. But I believe that we are really running out of options fast. And if we want to preserve cohesive society at peace, this is the problem number 1 that we need to be solving right now. Yeah. Shall we go to number 2, the resource independence?
Yes, let's do that.
I think that if you look at resource independence as, and by the way, I believe that like this framework, I think that both the United States and China are in a competition to address these 6 in their unique ways, and that a lot of what we are seeing in terms of behavior of United States right now is in service of them securing their energy independence and resource independence so that they can close the economic loop within their geographic boundaries. That's what's happening, really. And that the similar thing is happening with China, that China is also trying to close these 6 elements in their own way. And that what we're really observing is really the global competition between 2 ideologies, 2 different views of how to solve for abundance for their population. And that fight that is now occurring is essentially a combination of fight towards energy independence and the resource independence at the same time. So on resource independence, I would also score us 4 out of 5, actually, pretty high score. I think that we are coming to the point where technology is actually allowing us to manufacture and mine raw materials in a very effective way, and that we are, I believe that we are a 4 out of 5, and that if we play this right within the next decade, there will be societies who are emerging as completely resource independent, allowing them to independently create, this abundance for their population. I would say 4 out of 5. On the advanced AI, compute, and full connectivity, I would also mark as high there. but not 4 out of 5. I would say 3 out of 5. I think that we are really just now scratching the surface of the potential that artificial intelligence systems are providing us. That we are right now in this moment of shock, discovery, excitement, concern, and that it will take some time for normalization of this capability, its adoption. It'll take some time to provide full connectivity for everyone. So I would mark us as, let's say, 3 out of 5. If you're looking at a 5 to 10 year horizon and the need to be at 5 within 5 to 10 years. Full automation and autonomy, this I think is going to be taking longer or longest, simply because of the required scale of production of physical AI systems, both commercial robots and humanoid robots. So I would say that we probably are at a 3 out of 5 on full automation and autonomy. As many of your audience members will know, yesterday Tesla lit up its first full autonomous robotaxi in Austin, Texas. And what that actually is, it's a fully autonomous and automated intelligent robot on wheels. It has happened. It has happened. Not only has it happened, but it has happened with the technology that everyone who owns a Tesla now has. So this transition is going to be real, and it's happening right now. The next step is going to be autonomous and automated humanoid robots, and I think that is going to take some time, as I said, because of the required scale of physical manufacturing. If you listen to what Elon is saying, he's proposing that, at the end state, everybody is going to have their personal humanoid robot next to them. And I believe that's actually true. There will be probably more of them than us. So I think that this was probably that we are furthest away from closing that loop. We now may be at 2 out of 5, but I think that this is inevitable. Optimized supply chains, I think that is going to be actually simple. Once we have advanced AI systems, full automation and autonomy, optimized supply chain is going to be very simple. So I would say, that is probably 4.5 out of 5. I'm not too worried about it, but I'm mostly worried about post-labor economic system. I would say that we are at 1 out of 5 on the post-labor economic system. I think that's where our blind spot as humanity now is, and that we have to have this conversation really quickly and really honestly. Now, whom do we have conversations with about this? We have to have conversation with industry champions and industry leaders, those who are actually creating this world that is pushing us to post-labor situation. So they have to be part of the conversation and solution. Governments have to be part of the conversation and solution, and that's governments at all typical three levels of governance, like local, municipal, counties and municipalities, provinces or states or regions, and ultimately, nation states. All of these will have to play a role. Academia is going to be very, very important in helping, helping with ideas and models that could work. I think also personally, individuals will have to be facing this and thinking and acting to position themselves for this new reality. But I think that out of these 6, we are probably the weakest in that post-labor economic solution.
Yeah, I think part of it is a lot of economists and politicians. It's not good politics in the short term to talk too much about this and address it, right? And the economists, on the other hand, if you look at their models I saw a forecasting of GDP for the next 30 years for the US. It's just a straight line around 2.8%. So none of these government economists actually try to calculate this impact.
Yeah. Or they're not sharing the calculations with public.
That could be.
Right?
What do you think?
I think that they're not sharing calculations with the public. Like, if you and I are talking about this, then there is no scenario in which, the best minds in United States, China, Russia, India are not busy modeling this out, right? So I think that my fear is that they don't yet have a solution, and that's why this is not more broadly discussed. Or the solution that they come up with, like universal basic income, is perhaps polarizing. And as you rightly point out, we live in a system where, we live in a 4-year political cycles that overlap. And therefore, our system is incentivizing those who are in power to really think mostly short, mid-term, and not long-term. This is the risk. This is the actual risk. What you identified is one of those big risks that we need to face and solve collectively, right?
Yeah, because I mean, as you mentioned, right, some income come from investments, but that is very unevenly distributed, right? There are the people who saved
Yes.
most saved up for their retirement, but let's say you are in your early 40s, then that will not come in time. Then, of course, one solution could be, if we get abundance, to say, okay, people now have access to their retirement funds early. Many of them will not be large enough to alleviate the problem, but it could help.
It could help. So I think that some models are emerging, and some models are definitely emerging. And I am a follower of one of your previous guests, David Shapiro, who has been spending time thinking, analyzing, and proposing solutions for these problems. And I actually think that what he is talking about is very true and very real, and we should be paying attention. So his proposition is that essentially there will be 5 sources of income that need to replace the current sources of income, right? Currently we have wages, property rights, and government transfers, right? We need to rebalance this. And to rebalance this, the proposition is that as the wage pillar goes down, actually property rights pillar needs to rise up. That should be the shift that we are balancing. There might need to be some increase in the government transfer, that full government paying for people to just be at home ain't going to work. That is going to lead to a catastrophe, right? The atrophy of human everything. So to me, that is not the answer. The answer has to be us figuring out how do we shift the balance so that people's income comes not from wages anymore, majority of it, but from property rights. Now, the question is obvious. How do you get property rights if you are in your 20s and you have nothing, right? No capital, no money. You're working in a your first job, and that first job only pays you enough to pay your rent or mortgage, right? So there has to be other sources of income that gradually get built to provide you with that compensation that supplements your wages. So here is what David Shapiro's model suggests: that there will be universal basic income, and that universal basic income is going to be offered to everybody and should be sufficient perhaps to cover the most basic sustenance needs: food, water, perhaps shelter. And you can think of it from the Maslow hierarchy of needs pyramid perspective, right? That bottom layer, the need to have shelter, air, water, and food, that is what we need to address. And perhaps addressing it through some form of universal basic income would be the way to address that. But on top of that, you have to start building property rights for people. And that could be done, for example, there are examples of everything that I'm going to talk about, active examples happening someplace in the world. There is a concept of a sovereign wealth fund and dividends that come from sovereign wealth funds, right? And those sovereign wealth funds could be constructed at, national level, like what Norway has, or even subnational level. If there are particular regions, states, or geographies that have particular benefits, a particular access to resources of value that could be converted into wealth fund that could be paying dividends to people on top of their universal basic income. Now, on top of that, there is collectively owned private property, private assets. You could be, contributing. You could be, for example, your banking could be done through a co-op bank, right? Your loyalty points of your purchases could be converted into, microscopic fractional units or share ownership, right? So you can gradually be building your personal property that is shared amongst the whole collective. On top of that, you have your own personal property savings, your 401k, and so on and so forth. And then at the very top of that, you then still have your wages that are kind of residual. And then when you stack it all up, that should be the model people think about. And people, and not people, societies should be exploring and figuring out, how do we construct this, 5 Lego blocks, one on top of the other, that would be ultimately sufficient to replace the wages we are losing. Now, it's that will be complex and hard, but there are 2 factors that are helpful. The first factor that is helpful is this technology being a deflationary force. So while we are struggling to do this, the costs of manufacturing all the goods and services ought to be going down, right? That's number one benefit. The second benefit, the second way to solve for this, is that you can actually incorporate gradual reduction of the expectation of the work that is being done in terms of effort. So right now we have normalized at 40-hour week, 5-day work week. Part of the solution could be decrease of the work week from 5 days to 4, from 4 days to 3, and so on and so forth. Now, those could be the additional elements that contribute to solution. But to me, that's really the most important thing that we as humanity need to be now discussing and solving for, and leading us to the ultimate state, let's say 10 years from now, 15 years from now, where that all of these factors have been closed off. So the 6 elements are all present, right? And what that translates into is a society of abundance where all of us can sustain the similar quality of life we have today, but with a fraction of the income needed, right? So the way I would describe this is, like, you obviously, the first IBM mainframe computer cost multi-million dollars in late 40s, early 50s. Multi-million-dollar computers that have the power that is now superseded by the most simplest device we have, on ourselves, like this Apple Watch, right? So the deflationary effect of technology is dramatic. If you play that movie out, one could say, look, in the future, perhaps purchasing a car that now costs $60,000, maybe that car, when it's done fully automatically, could cost $6,000, right? Maybe the food and groceries that you go to buy now that cost you a few $100s per shopping trip, if they are manufactured at scale, fully automatically and locally, could be the fraction of the cost. So where I'm going with this is that, one positive out of this is that the actual amount of equivalent money in the future needed to sustain high quality life might also be a fraction of what is needed now, which would be a helpful relief to this particular problem. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think maybe we should end part 1 here on that note, and then when you return, let's discuss how can people now tactically kind of deal with these changes.
Sure, of course.
Should we do that?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. That's it for this episode of the Mind Blowers podcast. But why stop here? If you're curious about the future of the world we live in, check out one of our other episodes, like the one about the security situation in Europe, or dive into more mind-blowing conversations about AI, geopolitics, and what's coming next. You'll find more right here on this channel, or on my other channel, Daniel Kafer. See you in the future.